Hi everyone, welcome to today's webinar about US expat taxes. So everything about the stimulus payments, how you can claim the stimulus payments if you haven't already, how to file your taxes for 2020, and how to file your taxes from abroad in general. So let's jump right in. My name is Natalie, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of MyExpat Taxes, the leading US expat tax software. So I'm actually from California, based in Vienna, Austria. So I'm also filing my US expat taxes as well. And my background is in finance and information technology. I specialize in US expat taxation, and I am an enrolled agent certified by the IRS. I created MyExpat Taxes because as an expat abroad, I was looking for a way to file my US taxes that didn't involve paying, a big firm $500+ just to file paperwork. But I was also looking for a better solution than the US-based tax softwares that just weren't really meeting the needs of US expats that didn't know anything about foreign compensation, foreign pensions, foreign social security benefits, and the list goes on. So that's really where MyExpat Taxes came to be. Tonight, we're going to cover everything about the stimulus payments, the recovery rebate credit, and what that is. So hint for you all, if you haven't claimed the stimulus payments, you're going to be looking to be claiming the recovery rebate credit on your 2020 tax return. Aside from that, we're going to talk about the new tax season changes. In general, do you need to file? What are the filing deadlines? And everything you need to know about US expat taxes. So as you're looking around for different solutions to file your US expat taxes, look no further than MyExpat Taxes. As I said, we provide award-winning US expat tax software. We're the leading tax filing platform for Americans abroad per Yahoo Finance. You can e-file in as fast as 15 minutes. We really offer a premium tax software only for 149 euros flat fee, where you have instant access to tax professionals to go through your questions. There's also different support tiers. So if you want more than a US expat tax software, but you really want to work with someone personally, even schedule calls, we also offer those options. And because we only focus on US expats, we're always looking for the best expat tax benefits for you to ensure that you're getting your maximum refund. So a lot of expats that don't even know that they have to file, they end up going through MyExpat Taxes and doing the streamline procedure, which we're the only US expat tax software that allows for the streamlining procedure. And as they go through it, they realize that they've been missing out on thousands and thousands of dollars of refunds. So yeah, if you haven't been filing, if you have been filing and you're looking for a different solution, like I said, look no further than MyExpat Taxes. Give it a try. It's free to create an account, go through the software. You'll even see what is your tax result at the end. So if you're due a refund, hooray. If you think you'll owe taxes and you want to ask questions, you can always ask us a quick question and we're always going to be there for you. Now, let's get on to the stimulus payments, what you're most likely here for. All right, everything about the second round of the stimulus payments, and that was enacted in December of last year, is essentially financial aid that the US government gave to all Americans abroad. No matter if you're living in the US or living abroad, you're still eligible for the stimulus payments. So if you're sitting here wondering, how can I get this? Even though I live abroad, rest assured you are eligible to claim it. There's just a couple steps you're going to have to take. Now, if you're going to talk to the stimulus payments directly to the IRS, or you're going to read any IRS publication, you're going to want to know what the official terms are. So the stimulus payments is really what it's referred to in the media. It's actually called the economic impact payment or the recovery rebate credit per the IRS. So especially if you're filing your 2020 tax return to back claim these credits, it's going to be called the recovery rebate credit. So that trips off a lot of expats, but it's all under the same umbrella. So how much are the stimulus payments worth? It depends on which round we're talking about, because there were multiple rounds. The first round was $1,200 per taxpayer and then $500 per qualifying dependent. Now the second round was $600 per taxpayer and $600 per qualifying dependent. And in order to get these stimulus payments, you would need a valid social security number. And then on top of that, you cannot be the dependent of another filer. So you would have to make sure, especially if you're a younger filer, that no one is claiming you on their US tax return. So again, this is being a dependent on a US tax return, not being a dependent on a Canadian tax return. Now, the same eligibility rules applied for the second round of stimulus checks as the first round. And again, like I said, it's really these three checks. Do you have a valid social security number? Can you be claimed as a dependent? And do you meet the income thresholds in terms of, is your income too high? So of course, as this is seen more as a type of financial aid during this pandemic, there are phase outs for high earners, meaning that if you made too much money, then you probably are not going to get the full payment, if any. But essentially, again, it comes down to having a valid social security number. So if you are married to a non-resident, a non-US citizen, and a non-resident alien, and they don't have a social security number or an ITIN, don't worry, as long as you have a valid social security number, that's fine. Even if you're filing with someone that has an ITIN, you will still get your stimulus checks as long as you have a valid social security number. So this is actually one of the biggest changes from the first round, is that even if you file with someone with an ITIN, that doesn't disqualify you from getting the stimulus checks yourself. Now, the second one is making sure that you're not claimed as a dependent, like I said, and then again, all to do with income thresholds. So even if you make no money, you can still file a 2020 tax return to claim the stimulus payments. Just be aware that if your adjusted gross income is too high, which we'll get into, you might not get the full amount. And again, one of the biggest changes for this round of stimulus payments is that there is no non-filer portal. So if you heard about it, the non-filer portal, which opened up last year, that allowed a lot of people who didn't need to file a tax return in order to go into the system so the IRS would give you the stimulus payments. They closed that. So now, even if you don't need to file because you're not making any income abroad, you still have to file a 2020 tax return in order to back claim your stimulus payments. And again, how much are the payments? It's $1,200 for the first round, $600 for the second round. And then depending on what filing status you get, there can be more money, and if you have a qualifying child. So qualifying child is really important. It's someone that you can claim as dependent on your tax return that's younger than 17 and has a valid social security number by the due date of your return, including filing extensions. I say that because if you have, if you have a baby or you are getting a social security number for your children currently, and you think that you'll be able to get a social security number for your child before October 15th of this year, it might be worth it to file an extension now, even if you can file your tax return, to just file the extension now so that you have a longer amount of time to be able to claim that dependent. Because even if you didn't have a dependent last year, but you get a social security number for your dependent this year and you claim them on your 2020 tax return, you will still be able to back claim those amounts for your dependent this year. So again, if you think that you're going to be able to get a social security number for a dependent, or you're in the process of doing so, just make sure you file a filing extension so that you have a lot more time to get that. And the filing extension is up to October 15th. But if you need time until December 15th, there are ways to get an extension to that date as well. And of course, if you're signed up with MyExpat Taxes, we'll keep you informed about how to get the filing extensions and when to file them and what to do. So now, if you're looking to get the recovery rebate credit, so that means that you did not get the first and second round of the stimulus payments, either because you've never filed or, for 2019, you just didn't need to file a tax return, then you would be claiming it on your 2020 tax return. So what you would do is go ahead and use either MyExpat Taxes or any other tax software or tax provider. They will ask you how much money did you get for the economic impact payment round 1 and 2, right? So you would go ahead and enter that amount. So if you got 0 or you're not aware of getting any money for the stimulus payments, of course, enter 0. What's going to happen next is that you're going to have to complete your 2020 tax return in order to calculate your adjusted gross income. Now, there are different filing thresholds, as I said. So if you see on the screenshot from the worksheet I put there, that it's $150,000 if you're married filing jointly or a qualifying widow. It's 112,500 if you're head of household, or 75,000 if you're single or married filing separately. If you think that your adjusted gross income is going to be higher than these amounts because of how much money you've earned abroad, there are actually ways to reduce your adjusted gross income. So for expats especially, if you use the foreign earned income exclusion, you can actually subtract your foreign earned income from your adjusted gross income. So say, for example, you earn the equivalent of 100,000 US dollars abroad. If you use the foreign earned income exclusion and you qualify for that, you could effectively subtract 100,000 US dollars from your adjusted gross income to get to a $0 adjusted gross income and still qualify for the full stimulus payments. Now, there's a different question about if that's technically the best thing to do or the right thing to do, but that's not really discussion here. It's just how do you lower your adjusted gross income to get the full stimulus payments. And expats do have the foreign earned income exclusion in order to help them get there. So if you did file a 2019 tax return and your adjusted gross income was too high for the stimulus payments last year, if you think that you can use foreign earned income exclusion this year, then it very well be that you can back claim the stimulus payments, even if you're a high earner. Now, if you are eligible for them after the adjusted gross income check, you're going to automatically see the stimulus payments as a refund on your tax return. So you'll see it on line 30 on your form 1040. So 1040 is effectively the cover sheet of your tax summary that you would give the IRS. And on line 30, where I highlighted, is the recovery rebate credit. This is the stimulus payments. So, don't get kind of confused about what that is. That is really just back claiming the stimulus payments. And of course, as you continue through the tax return on form 1040, you'll most likely get a refund. So I will say, if you are living abroad, a couple tips would be try to get a US bank account to get the refund in. We had a lot of expats last year who, did not use a US bank account because they did not have one, and they ended up getting a paper check sent to them. Obviously, it's a little bit harder to deal with a US paper check when you're abroad. So we do recommend, if you can, look for some online options to get a US bank account. There's a lot of different options out there. And then on top of that, you might want to use a US mailing address as well, just so it's easier to receive IRS communication if you do have a US mailing address available. So that's pretty much everything with the stimulus payments. Now we'll jump into the filing requirements of why you even have to file taxes as an American abroad. That's a pretty common question. I will say it's something we can't really escape. I always like to joke that it's the cost of a US passport, because literally in your passport, I challenge you all to open up your passport. I'm sure it hasn't had too much use over the past few months. Open up to the back section and you will see that there's, this section in there that says you have to file US taxes no matter where you live or work. So I'm sorry, but it's just the way the regulations are. So Americans abroad are subject to the same taxation laws as their family and friends back home. And you have to file if your gross income is over the tax filing threshold from all sources. So another really common question is, I live in Canada, I only have income from a Canadian employer. I only have income from Canadian pensions, Canadian social security benefits, Canadian sources, right? I have literally not a single dollar of income from the US. Do I still have to file a tax return to the US? If the total of all your gross income from Canadian sources, from any other sources, is over the filing requirements, as you can see in the table there on the slide, then yes, you do have to file a tax return. Even if you don't step foot in the US, even if you don't make a single dollar from the US, because the thing is, the US taxes you on your worldwide income. So just keep that in mind. I know it's kind of difficult to accept, but it is what it is. And so the filing requirements do change every single year. It's usually in line with the standard deduction. I will call out that if you're married to a non-US citizen like I am, and you're filing as married, filing separately, which is what I usually file as, the filing threshold is only $5. So that's not a typo on the screen. They did this in 2018 and they never reversed it. So if you're married filing separately, if you make enough money to buy Starbucks, you have to file a tax return. If you're self-employed, and that doesn't just mean that your profession is self-employed, but say you did a couple freelancing gigs over the past few months, if you made over $400 in net profit from, self-employment income, you have to file a tax return regardless of the filing requirements, because, the US wants to make sure that if you owe self-employment tax, that you'll pay it. As someone living in Canada, technically, you should never be subject to US self-employment tax if you are paying into the Canadian system because of the totalization treaty, but you still have to file a tax return regardless. And also, like I said, if you did not get the stimulus payments before, even if you don't need to file a 2020 tax return, you might want to file a 2020 tax return because you may be eligible for a refund. So if you're curious about it and you don't necessarily need to file, but you want to see if you get the stimulus payments, you can just go into the MyExpat Taxes tax software, enter in your information without paying anything. And at the very end, before paying, you'll see if you get a refund or not. So always something I like to tell people to try, because if you can get a refund, you should claim it, right? So I saw a question that was entered before is, do you have to file back taxes in order to claim the stimulus payments? The short answer is not necessarily, right? The way to claim the stimulus payments is to file your 2020 taxes. You don't necessarily need to file your back taxes, but I would also say you should file your back taxes. If it's something that's keeping you up at night, if you have even any trace in the US and you think that the IRS might have any records of your income, obviously you should get ahead of this. So if you're not filing taxes, rest assured there is an amnesty program for Americans abroad. It's called the Streamlining procedure. I'm sure you've probably seen it around, and it's not that daunting, right? So even if you haven't filed for 10, 20 years, etc., you only have to complete 3 back years of taxes plus 6 back years of FBARs. FBARs being the foreign bank account report. So this will really help you catch up with the IRS without any penalties for late filing or late payments. You may owe interest if you end up owing tax. Most expats don't owe tax, but it's a great program to just go ahead and get caught up with the IRS and have a fresh conscience. So yeah, answer to that is you don't need to file back taxes to get the stimulus payments. You can't just file your 2020 tax return. That's fine, but the program is there. You don't know how long the program will be there for. The IRS does, evaluate it every year if they're going to keep this program active or if they're going to close it. So they've closed other programs similar in the past. So I do highly recommend to go through the Streamline procedure and just get it out of the way. Now, when it comes to 2020, what you're going to want to do in order to claim your stimulus payments is to e-file 2020. So as an expat, I will warn that if you use other tax softwares, especially US-based tax softwares or other tax firms, there might be a chance that at the very end, they're not going to let you e-file. Because say you are married to a non-US citizen, you're married filing separately, and your spouse obviously doesn't have a US Social Security number or ITIN. This error doesn't let most people file their tax return, which is kind of silly because I think a lot of expats are in that situation. So just keep that in mind. If you paper mail a tax return, it's going to take a lot of time to process because the IRS is they're so overwhelmed at this point, right? They're understaffed, they're overwhelmed, and they have a giant stack of paper returns to go through. So from our survey that we did last year, a lot of expats that paper mailed their return last year, early last year, March, April, they still haven't gotten their stimulus payments because their tax returns just not been processed. So if you can help it, try to e-file. MyExpat Taxes does allow pretty much almost all expats to e-file, right? There's only some certain rare cases that we cannot allow e-filing, but a majority of our filers will be able to e-file regardless if you're married filing separately or anything, because we work with the IRS directly in order to e-file these returns. And yeah, if you are thinking about the Streamline procedure, it can be pricey depending on where you go. I will say we offer it for about 1/3 of the price of most other competitors. And because it's all online, people can do it relatively fast. We have people that complete their entire streamlining package in a day, send it off, and they're done. But, obviously go ahead and check out what other options are out there in the market. And just know that MyExpat Taxes is always there for you, whether you're filing 1 year, you're filing streamlining, regardless of how complex your situation is. You'd be surprised how much our tax software can really help with. Now, a couple of the filing deadlines for Americans abroad that are important is April 15th is the deadline for everyone to pay, right? No matter if you're abroad or you're in the States, if you owe taxes, you need to pay by April 15th. That's just the way it is. But if you are living abroad, you don't have to file until June 15th. That's a complete chicken and egg situation. And it sounds as weird as it is, but really, you don't technically need to file until June 15th because of a 2-month automatic extension for all expats. But if you don't pay by April 15th, there can be interest that applies in those 2 months. So I always like to say, if you think that you'll owe tax, try to file early, or at least make some extension payments so that you will lower your tax burden instead of just waiting till June 15th. Now, if you need more time, like say you need to get a social security number for a dependent, or you need to get all of your documents in order, you can file for an extension to October 15th with Form 8668. So MyExpat Taxes does allow you to file these extensions. We're going to open that up in March, but you can also file this extension technically by hand. You can send it in. I don't think the IRS will process it before you actually end up sending in your tax return, but at least it's on their desk. Otherwise, there's so many other options to be able to file this form. And also a trick, if you want to make sure that you're in the system for the IRS for the filing extension, you can even just go to irs.gov/payments and pay $1. If you pay $1, then you actually already qualify for the filing extension. And then you can just claim your dollar back as a refund if you want, or just leave it with the IRS, up to you. But like I said, there's a lot of different ways to file the extension. Either you can use any tax software, they should all support it, or you can take matters in your own hands and just pay $1 on irs.gov. So if you're filing back taxes, I say ASAP, just to avoid any additional interest, right? If you streamline, there won't be really any penalties there, but there can be interest. And if you're not streamlining and you're just filing a late year, if you owe tax, there might be penalties. So, I think a lot of people have more times on their hand now. So if you have back taxes, just get it out of the way. Anyways, so we can go in and essentially this, if you end up doing your own taxes or you just want to understand your tax return better, this is essentially a cheat sheet for you to know what forms are included in your tax return. So everyone should be using Form 1040. There are different schedules to use. So Schedule 1, Schedule 2, Schedule 3. And then if you're claiming the additional child tax credit, it's going to be Form 8812. And again, you're going to be using either the 2555 or the 1116. All expats essentially use these forms to ensure that they don't have US income tax owed. It's just a matter of, are you going to use foreign earned income exclusion? Are you going to use foreign tax credit? Are you going to use a combination of both? Now, if you're getting Canadian Social Security benefits or even US Social Security benefits while living in Canada, you might want to be filing Form 8833 to claim a tax treaty benefit. So that will help to make sure that certain income is not taxable in the US per the Canadian-US tax treaty. And then on top of that, like I said, you do have to file an FBAR and Form 8938 if you meet those filing requirements. So a little bit more into the different expat tax benefits is if you want to use foreign earned income exclusion or foreign tax credit or tax treaty. This is really kind of my overview of why you should use which one versus the other. So for a lot of people that just move abroad, foreign earned income exclusion is usually the easiest, but it might be easy to claim. It is very limiting. So I actually recommend foreign tax credit. It's a bit more difficult because there is a lot of math involved if you look at the form, but you can claim the additional child tax credit. You can contribute to your US IRA if you want to. And there's just a lot more flexibility there. But again, it's not necessarily something you have to really think about and choose. If you use MyExpat Taxes, we will figure out what's the optimum expat tax benefit for you to use. But of course, if you end up doing your taxes yourself, these are kind of the three main ones you want to look at. And again, if you have certain types of income like Social Security, you definitely want to look at the tax treaty. So everything to do with FATCA, FBAR, all of that. Here are the links to actually get the forms themselves. So the FBAR is required if you have a maximum value of over 10,000 US dollars in all of your non-US accounts. And I'll get into how to calculate that. It's normally due on April 15th, but there's an automatic extension to October 15th. So we just say October 15th. And just keep in mind, this is not submitted to the IRS. This is submitted to the US Treasury. So that's really important because you don't attach this to your tax return to the IRS. You have to submit it through a different portal that the US Treasury has set up for you. Form 8938 is something you do attach to your tax return if you need to file it, but the filing requirement for that form is a lot higher. You need to have more than $200,000 normally. So I would say 50-50 of expats will end up filing that form. I guess it just depends on how long you've been an expat, how much money you have in your non-US accounts. Keep in mind that these two forms do have a hefty penalty with them if you don't file. I would say on your tax return, there's not too many things that carry a very hefty penalty, but the FBAR and Form 8938 definitely do. So if you don't file them, the IRS says that they will or they can penalize you up to like $10,000 per year. I think in reality, I've never really seen that happen too much, but it is a possibility. So if you think you have to file, go ahead and file it. Even if you're not sure if you exactly meet the filing requirement for it, if you want to be safe, just file it. Now, the FBAR, like I said, is to calculate your max. It's not your average, it's not your ending balance, it's your maximum balance. So what you would do is ignore any US accounts. You would only look at your Canadian accounts, and you're going to figure out, okay, I have 7K and I have 6K. Also, I put in there AUS because I did an Australian webinar yesterday, so ignore that. But you have 7K and you have 6K. You combine that to be 13K Canadian dollars combined as a max value in your Canadian account. That's over 10,000 US dollars. You have to file an FBAR and you have to report each account. So even if you have accounts with no balance in them that's sitting in Canada or elsewhere in the world, they still have to be reported on the FBAR if you're filing an FBAR. Now, a lot of people ask, what happens if I transfer money from one account to the next? So say in bank account number 1, you had the 7K, and then bank account number 2 was empty. But then you transferred 6K from bank account number 1 into bank account number 2. Even though that 6K is the same 6K that was in account 1 and account 2, technically you now have these different max values of 7K and 6K. So yes, you do have to file. So I say if for a second your bank account reached an amount, like a maximum amount, that's the amount you take, no matter if it was only for a second and the money was out the next day. And, you know, no bank really gives you your maximum value. So what you're gonna have to do is either look at your monthly statements, or what I do is pull essentially a spreadsheet of all my transactions from my bank account, like a CSV file, and I just calculate kind of a running balance. So that's what I do when I calculate my own FBAR. And that really is pretty much everything that I tried to fit into a 30-minute session about taxes.